My name is Maya Reeves. I was 32 years old when my brother introduced me to his new business partners at Thanksgiving dinner and called me the family's tech support girl, complete with air quotes, and a laugh that the whole table joined in on. He didn't pause. He didn't look at me after. He just kept talking, refilling his wine glass, describing himself as a visionary entrepreneur, while I sat at the far end of the table with my sweet potato casserole going cold in front of me, and my mother nodding like he'd said something reasonable. My sister-in-law added, "She's always been the one you call when the Wi-Fi goes out." More laughter. My father chuckled into his napkin. My aunt leaned over to her husband and whispered something I didn't hear. But the smile on her face told me enough. Even my nephew, 9 years old, and already learning the family's favorite sport, piped up and asked if I could fix the TV remote while I was at it. I set my fork down on the edge of my plate, very carefully. The way you set something down when you're deciding whether to pick it up again. Nobody noticed that my brother had just mocked the one person keeping 3 of his businesses from going dark. Nobody noticed that the Wi-Fi girl at the end of the table had administrator credentials to every cloud system, payroll platform, point-of-sale network, and backup server connected to the family's restaurant group. Nobody noticed that the reason Thanksgiving weekend had gone smoothly, every register working, every payroll deposited on time, every vendor auto payment clearing without a single call, was sitting quietly with untouched casserole, deciding how much longer she felt like caring. I remember looking at my brother and thinking one thing: what would Friday look like if I just didn't show up? Before I tell you what happened next and exactly what that Friday looked like, I want to ask, what time is it where you are right now, and where in the world are you watching from? I genuinely want to know how far this is going to travel. I didn't cry driving home. I want to be clear about that because people expect the quiet one to cry. I drove home 26 minutes through empty streets, the radio off, and by the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I had moved past hurt into something much more precise. Something that felt less like an emotion and more like a decision. I work in IT infrastructure, not help desk. Not did you try turning it off and back on. I design, implement, and maintain the back-end systems that businesses depend on to function. I manage cloud environments, redundancy protocols, security compliance, automated payment routing, and the kind of quiet technical architecture that nobody thinks about until it stops working. I have certifications that took me years to earn. I have clients who have offered me more money than my brother has ever paid me. And I have stayed in my family's orbit because my father asked me to, years ago, when the restaurant group was just one location and a dream, and he needed someone he could trust with the keys. That was 8 years ago. One location became 3. Then 4. The systems I built and maintained quietly underneath all of it scaled with every expansion. Every new POS terminal, every new payroll employee added, every new vendor contract with automated payment terms. It all ran through infrastructure I had designed and continued to manage on a retainer that my brother renegotiated down twice because, in his words, family doesn't nickel and dime each other. I had accepted that. I had smiled through the renegotiations, the jokes, the holiday dinners where my brother described himself as the architect of a growing brand and never once mentioned that the architecture he was standing on had been built by the girl he called tech support. My father knew, in the vague way that men of his generation know things they prefer not to examine too closely. He knew I was important. He just didn't understand how, and understanding how would have required asking questions. And asking questions would have meant admitting he'd allowed my brother to undervalue me for the better part of a decade. My mother's version of support had always been a gentler form of erasure. She praised my brother's vision at every dinner, forwarded his press mentions to the family group chat, and introduced him to her church friends as the one building something real. When people asked about me, she would say I was very good with computers, the same tone she used to say a casserole was very filling. I had built the digital foundation of a 4-location restaurant group that did over $6 million in annual revenue, and my family's working understanding of my contribution was that I fixed the Wi-Fi. That Thanksgiving, something finished inside me. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, the way a door closes when there's no wind, and you almost don't hear the latch catch. 2 weeks before the holiday, I had sent a routine maintenance notice to my brother's operations email. Annual system review window approaching. License renewals, security certificate rotations, credentials audit, POS, firmware update cycle. I needed confirmation to schedule the work and updated payment authorization for the vendor contracts renewing in December. Standard process. I had done it every year for 8 years. He read the email and didn't reply. I followed up 5 days later, shorter and more direct. Renewal window closes in 10 days. Please confirm authorization. Vendor auto payments will require updated card credentials after the December 1st security rotation or drafts will fail. My sister-in-law forwarded it to herself. I could see the read receipts. Nobody responded. I sent a final message the Monday before Thanksgiving. Written carefully. Professional. This is the last reminder before the December 1st cutoff. If I don't receive updated authorization and the vendor credential file by November 30th, I cannot guarantee continuity of automated payment routing or system access after the rotation. Please advise. My brother replied that night with 4 words. Can it wait until January? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I closed my laptop, watched half a movie I don't remember, and went to bed. Thanksgiving came. My brother introduced me as tech support. The table laughed. My sweet potato casserole went cold. And I went home and made a decision that I should have made 3 years earlier. I would stop chasing them. I would complete the credential rotation on schedule. I would not, for the first time in 8 years, manually intervene to protect systems they had chosen not to engage with. If the vendors didn't receive updated authorization credentials before the December 1st cutoff, the auto payment routing would fail. If the POS license renewals weren't confirmed, the terminals would begin throwing errors. If nobody updated the payroll platform admin credentials before the rotation, direct deposits for the December 6th pay cycle would require manual reauthorization from my brother personally, something he had never once had to do because I had always handled it quietly before it ever reached him. I was not sabotaging anything. I was simply performing the exact level of service I had been paid for, and no more. I was completing my professional responsibilities without extending the personal ones I had never been paid for and never been thanked for. I sent one final email. Very short, very clear, addressed to my brother and CC'd my father. Credential rotation will proceed as scheduled on December 1st. Vendor auto payment routing, POS licensing, and payroll platform access will require manual reauthorization if updated credentials are not received by November 30th. I am available for questions before the deadline. My brother did not respond. My father did not respond. November 30th came and went like a Sunday should, quiet and unremarkable. I did my laundry, meal prepped for the week, watched football, and slept 8 hours for the first time in longer than I could remember. December 1st, the rotation ran on schedule. The first call came at 6:47 inches the morning on December 2nd. My brother. I watched his name light up my phone and placed it face down on my bathroom counter and finished getting ready for work. He called again at 6:52, then 6:58, then once more at 7:04 before switching to text. The text came in a sequence that told me exactly how the morning was unfolding at his end. First, vendors are calling, payments failed. What did you do? Then, 8 minutes later, the registers at the Eastbrook location are throwing errors. POS is locked out of the network. Then, at 7:34, payroll is asking me for an authorization code. I don't have an authorization code. What is an authorization code? I read them in my car outside the office building where I had a 9 a.m. client meeting. Not my brother's office, a real client. One who replied to my emails, paid my invoices on time, and had never once introduced me as the Wi-Fi girl. I put my phone in my bag and went inside. My father called at 8:15. His voicemail was short and careful, the tone he used when he wanted to seem reasonable while communicating that he expected to be obeyed. Maya, something is going on with the systems. Your brother needs help. Can you call him back today? Not a question. Not quite a command. Just that particular frequency of parental expectation that I had been vibrating at the frequency of my entire adult life. I listened to it once. Then I went into my meeting. My sister-in-law left a voicemail at 9:30 that was a masterpiece of misdirection. Her voice was warm and a little confused, like someone describing a weather event. "Hi Maya, it's me. So apparently there's some kind of technical situation happening, and I think there might have been a misunderstanding about some deadline. We're getting calls from vendors about missed payments, and the front-of-house team at 2 locations can't process credit cards. I'm sure it's just a glitch. Can you maybe just take a quick look when you get a chance?" A glitch. 8 years of warnings reduced to a glitch. I sat in my car at lunch and looked at my phone. 17 missed calls across 3 family numbers. A string of texts from my brother ranging from panicked to accusatory. A forwarded screenshot from my sister-in-law, showing an error message on the Eastbrook POS terminal, the one I had specifically flagged as needing firmware maintenance before the rotation, in an email nobody had replied to. I opened my notes app and wrote down the time. 12:44 p.m. Then I put the phone back in my cup holder and drove to pick up a sandwich. There is something very clarifying about continuing your regular day while a manufactured emergency unfolds around people who chose to create it. I ate my sandwich. I reviewed contracts for my afternoon client. I stopped for gas and thought about what to make for dinner. The world where my competence mattered had been moving smoothly all day. It was only the world where I was the Wi-Fi girl that was experiencing technical difficulties. By 3 p.m., my brother had left a voicemail so thick with outrage it sounded like he was reporting a crime. "Maya, this is unacceptable. We have had to handwrite receipts at Eastbrook all day. Handwrite. Vendors are threatening to pause deliveries because of missed payments. I have been on the phone since 6 in the morning, trying to explain to people what is happening, and I don't even know what is happening. You need to call me back right now." I noticed he still hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't mentioned Thanksgiving. He hadn't used the word please. My father called again at 4:15. This time he came to it differently. His voice was quieter. "Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on between you and your brother, but 4 restaurants are affected and people's paychecks are at risk. Whatever happened, can we just solve the problem first and talk about everything else after?" Whatever happened. As if the problem had emerged from nowhere. As if 3 unanswered emails were not whatever happened. I called my father back. Not my brother, my father. He picked up on the first ring. "I sent 3 maintenance notices," I said, without hello, because I was tired of social softening. The last one was 5 days before the deadline. Nobody responded. The rotation ran on schedule. I didn't miss a step. I did exactly what my contract says I'm responsible for doing. A pause. "Your brother said he didn't understand what the notices meant." "I know," I said. "He's never had to understand them before because I have always handled the consequences before they reached him. Every year for 8 years. Another pause. Longer. I could hear him thinking. What do we need to do to fix it? And there it was. The first honest question anyone in my family had asked me in as long as I could remember. Not what did you do? Not how do we force you to fix this? What do we need to do? Your brother needs to call the payroll platform directly, I said. I'll text him the number and what to say. He'll need to verify his identity and reauthorize the pay cycle. That part I cannot do for him. The vendor payments will need to be manually processed by his operations team for this cycle. I can send a template. The POS licensing I can restore remotely once someone on your end emails the vendor authorization form, signed by the business owner, which is your son, not me. I'll send the form. How long will all of this take? The payroll, 2 hours if he does it today. The POS, same day once I have the signed form. Vendor relationships your brother will need to manage himself going forward. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I did not expect. He was rude to you at Thanksgiving. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. Yes, I finally said. He was. I laughed, my father said. Just that. No qualifier. No explanation. I sat with that for a moment. I know, Dad. I'll talk to him. Send me the forms too. I sent everything within the hour. The payroll authorization script, the vendor template, the POS licensing form, a clear, numbered list of what needed to happen in what order. I did not fix anything myself. I handed them the tools and the instructions, the same way I had tried to do 3 weeks earlier, and I let them do the work. My brother called at 7 p.m. I answered. He started the way I knew he would, with a modified version of an apology that was really a complaint wearing apologies clothes. Look, obviously things got out of hand today, and I'm sorry you felt like you weren't being heard about the deadline thing. Stop, I said. He stopped. I didn't feel like I wasn't being heard. I wasn't heard. There's a difference. I sent 3 written communications with specific deadlines and specific consequences for missing them. You read 2 of them and replied to 1 with 4 words. This isn't about feelings. It's about a professional relationship where my work was treated as optional until it became urgent. A pause. That's fair. I waited. And the Thanksgiving thing was he started. Another pause. I could hear him searching for a word that cost him less than the accurate one. That was wrong. What I said was wrong. You introduced me to your business partners as tech support. In front of the whole family. I know. You have 4 restaurants, I said. Every system running in all 4 of them, I designed. The inventory integration, the vendor payment routing, the payroll automation, the cybersecurity compliance that lets you take credit cards without liability exposure. I built all of it. Your accountant has told you twice that your operational efficiency is above industry average. Did you ever ask him why? Silence. No, my brother finally said. The reason is me. The invisible work you don't think about. Because I made it invisible. That's what you called tech support at Thanksgiving. I heard him exhale, long and slow. The sound of something deflating that had been kept inflated by not looking at it directly. I didn't know the extent of it, he said. I knew you managed things. I didn't know how much. You never asked. No, he said again. I never asked. What happened next surprised me. He didn't pivot to solutions. He didn't try to renegotiate or reframe. He just sat in it for a minute. In the silence of actually understanding something he had chosen not to understand before. And then he said, I'm sorry, Maya. Not about the system stuff. About Thanksgiving. About the air quotes. About 8 years of acting like what you do is less than what I do. I had prepared for arguments. I had prepared for deflection and bargaining and the kind of manufactured reasonableness that men in his position used to close a conversation without actually changing anything. I was not prepared for sincerity. I didn't say it was fine, because it wasn't. I said, thank you for saying that. We talked for another 20 minutes. Technical details mostly, the clean work of solving problems clearly defined. But underneath it, something had shifted that I could feel the way you feel, a change in air pressure before weather arrives. My sister-in-law texted me that night, just. He told me what he said and what I said. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. No deflection. No, in the spirit of moving forward. Just that. I replied with a single. I appreciate it. Because I did. My mother was harder. She called the next morning and spent the first 8 minutes of the conversation explaining the context of what had happened at Thanksgiving in a way that suggested she was circling an apology she couldn't quite land on. My brother was under stress. The business partners were important. She hadn't meant anything by what she said. She just hadn't realized. Mom, I said, when she finally took a breath. You said some kids just never grow up. In a room full of people watching me. You said it to get a laugh. She went quiet. I heard you, I said. I've always heard you. I just kept deciding that it was more important to keep everything running than to say something. Maya? I'm not asking you to feel terrible about it forever, I said. I'm asking you to understand that there's a version of your daughter you've never seen because you weren't looking for her. The one your son's accountant calls efficient. The one his vendors know by name. The one who kept the payroll clearing while you were posting his magazine profile in the church newsletter. She started to cry. Quiet and real, The kind that doesn't perform. I didn't know, she said finally. And what made it land was the I not we, not the family. Her own accounting of her own failure to see me. I know you didn't, I said. That's the part I needed you to know. The business consequences took most of December to sort through. The payroll delay created an HR headache my brother had to manage personally, for the first time in the history of the company. 2 vendors issued late fees that came out of operations cash. The Eastbrook location lost a full day of credit card processing, which during the first week of the holiday shopping season cost them a number my brother told my father about, and my father told me about, with a tone of quiet, chastened recognition. Vanessa, I mean. My sister-in-law lost a catering contract because the vendor communication gap created confusion about a December event booking. That one stung her in a way she was honest about, and honesty has a way of earning its own kind of respect. None of it was catastrophic. None of it was designed to be. It was proportionate, which is the part that made it stick. If it had been catastrophic, they could have cast me as the villain and rallied around that story. But it wasn't destruction. It was just the ordinary weight of a machine when one person stops carrying it for free. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my brother asked if we could have lunch. Just the 2 of us, at a place I chose, which was the first time the choice had been mine. He showed up on time, which he famously never did for family things, and he brought a folder. Inside the folder was a revised service agreement, one he had drawn up with his business attorney. The retainer rate was more than doubled. There was a clause acknowledging my role as lead infrastructure architect. There was a line that read, "Contractors' contributions to operational efficiency and system design are foundational to the company's function and growth." He had written that line himself. His attorney had told him it wasn't strictly necessary, and he had kept it anyway. "I want it in writing," he said, "because I should have put it in writing years ago." I read the whole document before signing anything, the way I always had, the way my instincts had always told me to, even when people around me found that habit slow or unnecessary or fussy. I caught a clause in the liability section that needed adjustment. He had his attorney fix it the same afternoon. I signed it 4 days later, after I had taken it to my own attorney, who confirmed it was clean. My father called me the evening I signed and asked if we were okay. I told him I thought we were getting there. He said he was proud of me, which he had said before over the years, in that vague parental way that doesn't attach to anything specific. This time, he said, "I'm proud of you for knowing your own worth when the rest of us didn't." That was the sentence that hit me somewhere between the sternum and the throat, and stayed there for a long time after. I won't tell you my family became perfect. They didn't. My brother still talks too much at dinner, and takes too much credit in interviews, and probably needs 2 more years of therapy before he fully understands how the air quotes at Thanksgiving were just one small surface expression of something much older and more structural. My mother still brags about him more than she brags about me to people at church, though I have noticed she has started describing what I do differently. Not computers. Not Wi-Fi. She told her neighbor last month that I architect the systems that keep businesses from falling apart, and when my neighbor asked her what that meant, she said, "It means nothing works without her." That was enough. Here is what I understand now that I didn't fully understand in the years I spent being the invisible infrastructure under my family's story of itself. Competence is not its own protection. You can be the person holding everything together and still be the easiest one to dismiss, because the more seamlessly you work, the more your work looks like nothing. The machine runs, and so people forget there is a machine. They forget there is someone running it. They start to believe the lights come on by themselves. The answer is not to perform your competence louder. It is not to stop doing good work. It is to stop absorbing the cost of other people's willingness not to see it. When I stopped catching the consequences before they arrived, when I let the machine run exactly as my contract described and no more, reality did the work I had been doing for free for 8 years. It explained, clearly and in the language of money and inconvenience that my family finally spoke, what I had been saying in the language of emails and maintenance notices and patience for a very long time. I didn't burn anything down. I just stopped putting out fires I hadn't started. There is a version of this story where I am the villain. I've read that version in comment sections and heard it implied in the way certain relatives have described the December situation. In that version, I was vindictive, calculated. I let things fail deliberately. I used my access as a weapon. That version is wrong, and I think the people who reach for it do so because the accurate version is more uncomfortable. The accurate version is that a system notified its users of a required action 3 times, they chose not to act, and the system did exactly what it said it would do. The uncomfortable part is not that I was calculating. The uncomfortable part is that I stopped being endlessly forgiving. Those are not the same thing, but people prefer them to be. I think about my grandmother sometimes, my father's mother, who spent 40 years as an office manager for a mid-sized law firm, and who everyone in our family described as the glue without ever examining what glue actually does. She died when I was 19, but I remember her telling me once, over tea in her small kitchen that always smelled like dish soap and old wood, that invisible work is the only kind that truly matters, and the only kind that truly disappears. She meant it as a comfort. I have come to understand it as a warning. If the people you are holding up cannot see the holding, eventually you have to decide whether the invisibility is protecting you, or only protecting them. I chose myself. It cost something, and it was worth it, and those two things can both be true at the same time. So here's what I would leave with anyone listening to this, and I mean this not as a lesson to perform or a quote to screenshot, but as something true that I had to break several things to learn. The person in your family, or your workplace, or your friend group, who is quietly making sure everything works, the one who answers the email, reads the fine print, catches the error before it becomes the disaster, shows up early and leaves late, and never once gets the toast at the party. That person is not background. They are the reason the foreground exists. And if you have been treating them like background, you should find out what happens when they finally, quietly, decide to stop. Have you ever been the one holding something together while everyone around you got the credit? Or have you watched someone get written off, only to realize too late they were the one the whole thing was built on? Because from where I'm standing, the most expensive mistake a family or a company, or any system built on people can make, is confusing someone's patience for someone's insignificance. The two things have never been the same. They never will be.